Iran spent decades building up its so-called axis of resistance. This sprawling network of proxies and partners plays an important role in Iran's strategy to oppose the United States and primarily Israel. It also allows Iran to exert its influence across the Middle East. But the axis has now suffered near irreparable damage and left Iran at its weakest and most vulnerable since the Islamic Republic came to power in 1979. So how did we get there? Let's talk about the axis of resistance first. Here's how the axis of resistance looked this time last year. In 1982, Iran helped create Hezbollah to resist Israel's invasion of Lebanon. This came as Iran was fending off an invasion by neighboring Iraq under Saddam Hussein. With us is Hamid Reza Azizi, a fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Mr. Azizi, how was the mood inside Iran at the time?
The fact that it was still like less than 2 years after the revolution, and the fact that it was an invasion, foreign invasion against the Iranian territory. These were the factors that resulted in popular support for kind of Iran's sustained campaign against Iraq, and actually it was the kind of significant sacrifices of people and the many lives that were lost that eventually saved the country, because it was seen purely as a national cause and something which had to do with Iranian sovereignty and territorial integrity.
At its peak, Hezbollah was estimated to have around 40,000 fighters. The U.S. State Department once described the group as the most technically capable terrorist group in the world. Then came Hamas in the occupied Palestinian territories. Designated a terrorist organization by the US and the EU, it was founded during the first Palestinian Intifada, or uprising, in 1987. Meanwhile, the war with Iraq is winding down. Mr. Azizi, what is the public's perception of the Islamic Republic at this time?
As the war started to be protracted, there were increasing signs of dissatisfaction among the public as well, because it started to be as a kind of never-ending conflict, and which was basically eroding whatever left from Iran's military, and also the kind of public exhaustion of the war. But still, the very reason that the Islamic Republic could, Iran, better to say, as a country, could resist 8 years of war was because of that public support.
Iran wasn't involved in Hamas's formation, but for years it provided it with limited material support. Tehran ramped up its financial and military support to the Palestinian group after it gained power in the Gaza Strip in 2007. And then there was Syria, the only state member of the Axis and essential to the network's expansion. The decades-long alliance stemmed from Damascus's support for Tehran during the war with Iraq. Syria could act as the linchpin in the Axis if Iran had influence in Iraq. The opportunity to build influence presented itself after the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the fall of Saddam Hussein. It created a power vacuum, which Iran promptly capitalized on. It has since been supporting a host of Shiite militias, some of which are influential in Iraqi politics and security. And when Syria's then president Bashar al-Assad needed help to suppress dissent, Iran came to his aid in 2013. Mr. Azizi, how important is Syria to Iran? You said earlier that as long as Saddam was in Iraq, Iran didn't have any land connection to the Levant.
After the fall of Saddam, it acted as literally as a bridge, allowing Iran to have this geographical connection gradually. And following the initial withdrawal of the American forces from Iraq in 2011, it became actually a main pillar in that regard. So that's why we saw Iran increasingly working to cement its presence in Syria.
The other key member of the Axis are Yemen's Houthi rebels, a Shiite movement that emerged in the 1980s. It was formed in response to the growing religious influence of neighboring Saudi Arabia, a Sunni kingdom. The group's disdain for Saudi Arabia and opposition to Israel made it a natural ally of Tehran. But Iran only started supporting it in 2015 as it toppled the internationally recognized Saudi-backed government in Yemen. The outbreak of the Gaza war in October 2023 was a turning point for the Axis. Hamas attacked Israeli settlements near Gaza, killing around 1,200 people and taking 251 hostages. In response, Israel launched a devastating offensive against Gaza, which killed more than 46,000 people, according to local authorities. With Hamas holed up in Gaza, other members of the Axis, especially Hezbollah and the Houthis, joined the fray. Israel's response was crushing. It kicked off a war with Hezbollah, degrading it politically, socially, and militarily. It also launched attacks against key Houthi infrastructure. But let's talk about Iran's domestic challenges for a minute. Iran's economy, crippled by U.S. sanctions, is suffering. The Islamic Republic is fast losing its legitimacy among Iranians. There have been several nationwide protests in the past decade. One of the largest ones was the Women Life Freedom protest in 2022, which shook the country and posed one of the strongest challenges to the Islamic Republic, as women demanded an end to systemic oppression. The authorities cracked down on the protests. Mr. Azizi, did events at home impact Iran's regional policy?
It was already evident, and it was against this backdrop that the Islamic Republic decided to increase its support for its partners in the axis of resistance following the October 7 Hamas attack against Israel, hoping that maybe that kind of showing force abroad would kind of help the regime also establish its rule domestically.
Now, let's go back to the Gaza war. In 2024, Iran and Israel exchanged fire for the first time as the war raged on, which left Tehran offensively and defensively weaker. Mr. Azizi, how was the situation in Iran after this?
Among the majority of the public, as I said, those who were already disillusioned with the government, that they see the government in a weak position. They see all the promises, all the talks and propaganda on strong regional policy as just hollow promises. And that gives kind of that adds fire to the fuel of public dissatisfaction, especially when we consider, such issues as Iranian financial support for the Syrian government, for other members of the axis of resistance, at the same time as poverty is spreading among the Iranian public.
To make matters worse, Iran's longtime ally in Syria, Assad, fled the country as Syrian rebels seized power, severing the golden ring in the chain connecting the axis of resistance. So, what are Iran's options now?
So for Iran, it's a choice between two not so favorable options, I would say. On one hand, the policy that they are already pursuing, and what I can see from the statements by Iranian officials, is that they want to negotiate even directly with the United States in order to reach an agreement, to reduce at least the sanctions, to stabilize the situation, which would allow them to satisfy domestic public, and at the same time to rebuild the regional network and maybe adopt a new path, maybe not, but at least kind of be in a more stable situation, which is quite needed for them.
And the other option?
The other option would happen, I would say, if the Iranian regime kind of thinks that or concludes that there's no chance for an agreement with the new U.S. administration. There are already people warning that this kind of enthusiasm, as they see it, expressed by some Iranian officials towards an agreement with the United States, would actually cause the other side to double down on its demands, and in the end, Iran will face a situation in which, again, as they frame it, the only option would be a total surrender and capitulation.
So, Iran finds itself stuck between a rock and a hard place. Will it engage the Trump administration to ease pressure both domestically and internationally, or will it double down on its failed policies and risk further isolation?